Hey everybody, welcome to the Funny Shrink podcast. We have an amazing guest with us today. I'm so excited to have her here. I've known her for, God, a long time. Karith, you look like you're 27, so I will say we've known each other about as long as you've been alive. Uh,
From birth. There you go.
I would say we've known each other about 15 years or so.
Yeah.
And we at the Funny Shrink podcast are so excited to have our next guest speaker, humorist, TED Talk presenter, and author, Karith Foster. I've known her for a long time. She is kind, sweet, and funny with a lot to say. Her book, You Can Be Perfect or You Can Be Happy, was released in June 2020. And I have to tell you, I read it. It's brilliant. Let's welcome Karith Foster, everybody.
Oh, thank
Yay!
you. Thank you. I thank
And
you so much for having me.
Mike is correct, Gareth. You do look young. You look like you could narc in high school, actually.
I look like I'm in high
No, you look like you could narc in high school.
I could be a narc for high school. Like 21 Jump Street. We're gonna
Yeah.
Well, thank you both very much. Listen, hey, melanin, it makes things better.
We are happy. So, uh, so tell us, you started out as a stand-up and you have pivoted to public speaking, keynote speaking. You have a TED Talk under your belt. Tell us about all of that. What's been going
Sure.
on?
Well, that's how we know each other is from the comedy world, and I found stand up, or rather, it found me back in the late '90s. And what's funny is I was in New York City because I was working for The View, and what got me to The View was I had gotten a degree in broadcast journalism from college, and this opportunity to work with Barbara Walters came up, the queen of broadcasting. And I thought, who better to learn from than Barbara? So I hopped on a plane, grew up in Texas, went to school in Missouri, found myself in New York. And it was in New York where I found stand up. And, I always thought, I always had this just internal, almost knowing of you wanting to be this beacon of light and truth, wanting to give people information that they could process, and hopefully on the other side of that processing realize that we're in this together, realizing that it's better to be kind than not, that and laughter was just such a key component. So when I found stand up, I was just like, wow, this is what I've been wanting to do anyway, is bring people together, get them to laugh, think, and grow, which is actually the motto of my nonprofit, Frame, which stands for Foster Russell Alliance for Meaningful Expression. Um, and we can talk about that in a second, but that was really where the journey began, was, well, probably childhood really, but what I've found and what I talk about in the book is there are no accidents, there are no coincidences. There are things and events that happen in our life that we get to choose the path, and maybe it's already been predestined, but we get to feel like we have a choice, and from there we can move forward, or find ourselves halted. And my point, my what I hope for everyone is that they choose to move forward even through the tough stuff.
That's brilliant. I love it. And I like you wanted to be that beacon of light. So that's why I'm into public speaking now. And what is the difference do you find between stand up and public speaking?
Well, I joke, that the difference between a humorist and a comic is a zero in the paycheck.
Yeah, I do as well. What's there to a humorist and a comic? About $5,000 a day plus travel.
Pretty much. But I mean, I think having the background as a comedian is such a bonus, because I feel like anybody could speak if they really wanted to. They can hone the craft of speaking, but it takes a special talent to get people to really genuinely laugh, and to be able to come from a stand-up comedy background where you can read the audience. I mean, I feel like as comics, we should have automatically an honorary degree in psychology, anthropology, and sociology.
Amen.
Um, you know, because we have to be able to read people and know them and feel them, and there's an empathy that comes with it that I don't think everyone on the planet has. And so you kind of have an upper hand when you're a comic going into speaking, but you still need to have something of substance to share. It's not just getting up there and telling your jokes. It's weaving the humor into the message, and the stories. But you know, we're such great. That's why I think comics are also great actors, because I can't think of anything more vulnerable, any art form more vulnerable than stand-up comedy. You know, it's all you, your face, your words, your thoughts, your ideas, your body, for all your flaws and all your strengths, for complete acceptance or complete rejection.
I totally agree. If you wouldn't mind, let's talk a little bit about that vulnerability, because I read some of your book, and I got to tell you, it's amazing. What really stood out to me is this passage you wrote. If you wouldn't mind me reading it.
Please.
I ended up spending an entire month of my junior year of high school in one of those adolescent psychiatric facilities, hoping to correct what was wrong with me, hoping to find what was missing. Like all high school students, and let's be honest, like all adults, all I wanted was to feel good and fit in. Thank God I had that option, as many don't. I learned a great deal about myself and my fortitude going through that incredibly dark and painful time. So it really sounds like you were able to pivot something tragic into something positive.
I was, and I was fortunate to have the support, to have parents who saw that I was struggling and knew that they needed to get outside help. They needed to, you know, get me the attention, medical, psychological attention that I needed, because I couldn't do it on my own. And it's so interesting how we, you know, I don't want to say dismiss mental illness, but I don't think we give it enough attention. Like we think it means you're like psychotic or bipolar, or, you know, I think there are a lot of people, especially right now with the whole social distancing being imposed, we need each other. We need to interact with other people. We need to be heard. We need to listen. We need to have that connection. And especially when you're dealing with something that is stressful for you, that is painful, you know, whether it's feeling distance from people in your class, going through hormonal changes. You know, I part of why I was having such issues is I was on a lot of medication. I was on steroids. I was on prednisone, which is a nightmare. Anybody who's been on it knows it does horrible things to your body, horrible things to you emotionally. It's just a nightmare, but I needed it to live because I had severe asthma and allergies. And I was also in an environment that really stressed perfection. Plano is a very lovely place. It's an affluent suburb north of Dallas, but it was all about, you know, how you looked and not what you drove and what did your house look like, not how you were on the inside. So I wasn't alone in this psychological, you know, dichotomy of trying to still be a human being, but also trying to meet this standard of perfection to pass. And I was not, it was not a very diverse environment at the time when I was growing up. My senior year of high school, there were 1,200 people in my graduating class. 12 of us were Black.
Whoa.
Yeah. I was part of the 1% before there was a 1%.
But wasn't the school system integrated in some fashion?
Well, it wasn't that it wasn't integrated. It just, where I lived was just there's just mostly white people. I mean, it wasn't like an intentional situation. It was, you know, nouveau riche, new money. My parents were doing well and they chose to live here. And so it just wasn't very diverse. It's much more diverse now. There are a lot more Asians here, Chinese and Indian, and more Black people. But so I actually switched schools because there were more Black people on the east side, which was considered the side that didn't have as much money. So I went there and I was the girl from the west side, and I didn't speak the way they did and act the way they did. And so I was kind of this outcast. And That was really what sent me over the edge, because I thought, oh, here's where I'm going to fit in. Like, these people look like me. So obviously they'll know what this is like. And I was shunned. I mean, for the first time in my life, I had people, bully me and treat me poorly, which you would have thought I would have had on the white side of town, but I didn't. And in fact, so that was a double whammy of, wow, how is this possible? Like, how am I being rejected by my people? And I found, as I've traveled around the country and spoken to different people, my case is not a solo case, and it's just unfortunate that we think that the way someone talks or behaves or carries themselves qualifies their whatever, their blackness, their gayness, their Democratness, their Republican, you know what I mean? Like, it's so insane that we place those stereotypes on each other. We're not monoliths. We're multifaceted individuals who should be allowed to express ourselves. But when you're young and you're an adolescent and you're dealing with all of that plus the hormones, I don't know if you're really in a place to have the maturity to understand that those people need to go fly a kite. What's wild though is how that storyline kind of was threaded through even my work in the entertainment industry, because I would go out for auditions as a Black woman, right? African American woman that would be like on the call sheets, and I wasn't Black enough for them. They couldn't say that in the auditions because that's not politically correct, but I get, can you jazz it up a little?
Yes, Robert Townsend, Hollywood Shuffle, the whole movie was
beautifully. He did a great job with that film. So it was interesting because I thought, I just had to deal with that in high school. Well, no, I had to deal with that as an adult and still do. It's interesting, but I think people are waking up a little bit more. I mean, right now we're in the middle of the Great Awakening, right, for multiple things.
How is that for you, being such a voice for the public in the middle of this pandemic, and also just America being fed up with discrimination and injustice? Like, how are you looking at that?
Well, I hope to be a voice of reason and sanity. My concern is that we will go from one extreme to another, and that's never good. We need to find an equilibrium somehow, because I don't care where you are on the scale of, Black Lives Matter to a complete racist. Like, if you're going to perpetuate hate and intolerance, that's not going to fix anything.
Well, it may fix the election in 2020.
But it's not going to, the election's the election, and I get it, right? I do. But after that happens, we're still going to have people at each other's throats. Like, that's not helpful. That's not healthy. And the work that I do in the diversity and inclusion realm, I actually coined the term inversity, because I feel like it's just been done very poorly for the past several decades. Because if it had been done better, we would be in a different place by now. And the reason I'm disappointed with how it's been done is because I feel as though it's been about putting people into groups, right? Well, you're diverse if you're a person of color, you're a woman, you're part of the LGBTQIA plus community. If you're a cisgender straight white guy, then you're not so diverse. So you just have to sit back and listen to everybody talk about what's going on. Well, how do you expect anybody to want to be part of that conversation if you're making them a victim or a villain? Mm-hmm. So with inversity, it's still acknowledging and respecting and honoring the amazing things that give us our unique qualities and the things that we bring to the table as human beings, but shifting the focus from what separates and divides us to what do we have in common? How can we be truly inclusive of one another? But most importantly, introspective, right? Meaning understanding your value, your worth, your connection to humanity. Because if you can see that in yourself, then you can see it in someone else. So instead of working from the outside in, like we've been trying to do for so long, we need to work from the inside out. And that's actually, that was a big part of why, I wrote the book, was because when you're happy with yourself, when you're okay with who you are, when you've learned to be kind and love yourself and treat yourself well, then you can do that for other people too. But it has to start with you. It has to.
That's a beautiful message. How has your experience with mental health kind of driven that fact?
Well, I think understanding, and listen, I have had such a charmed life. I have been so blessed beyond, I mean, beyond. And yes, I've had my struggles and my trials and tribulations, but I've not let them be excuses for things. I've let them be what's made me stronger. You know, I do a lot of speaking on free speech and the outrage culture now and the microaggressions and I go to a lot of colleges and universities basically saying, you know, guys, let's have open minds before we jump to a conclusion. Let's have a conversation with someone so we understand what we're saying and what we mean. Because I think mental health plays a big role in that and where you are and how you can process things. But if you're always looking to be the victim or to be on the receiving end of something that's negative, that's where you'll always be. It's like the law of attraction, right? So with regard to wellness, we also have to understand that not everybody is on that same level of wellness. Like we think, how could you be like, why would anybody be racist? It's so stupid. But some people don't know any better because they haven't been taught. Some people don't know any better because they just can't process that. You know, we're at different levels. And there's some people who, you know, there's a woman named Mia, God, I can't think of her last name right now, but she's a psychologist and she's a friend of the family. And she said, you know, people who like to cut will either become a surgeon or a serial killer. You know, and it's the same with like the power positions we see. People who like to be in power will use that for good sometimes or for bad. And we see that within police force. You know, there are so many amazing police officers out there who want to protect and serve. Unfortunately, what we've been seeing in the news are the crappy ones who want that power for you know, nefarious purposes. And so mental health, I think, and wellness should be definitely part of the conversation on a much broader level.
And you do such a good job of getting it out there. I'm interested in learning more about your company, your foundation.
Oh, sure. So Frame, as I said, it's a nonprofit organization, which stands for Foster Russell Alliance for Meaningful Expression. And our motto, as I said, is Laugh, Think, Grow. And our mission is to take educational programming that promotes free speech, inclusion, and social change to college and university campuses. And through that programming, I promote healthy dialogue, civil discourse, a way to, you know, bring people together. I mean, I never promise that we're all going to come out singing Kumbaya, because that's, you know, we're different people and that's fine. But what I want is healthy, respectful engagement where people can understand we don't have to agree on everything to still be productive and be kind and be respectful and see the worth of our fellow human beings.
That's beautiful. You like acronyms, I noticed. You got Frame, you got Inversity, you got a couple of other ones I can't remember, but
the GIST, the gift of GIST. Yeah.
So those are great. Because they're really catchy and you can remember them, except if you have a brain injury and you forget everything.
Oh, but even still, you remembered some, you know, you're like, oh yeah, no, because I listen, I have so much going on in my head. I can hardly keep, you know, I got kids, I got a cat, I got a husband, I got a chihuahua living with my parents. Like, it's a lot. It's a lot. I need stuff to easily remember things. But yeah, I call it, so in the book, you can be perfect or you can be happy, which I will very gladly plug. I call it getting back to the basics.
Uh-huh.
You know, and the basics is an acronym for several things. Like the B stands for be kind, right? Not just to other people, but to yourself. Be present. That's a big one. And believe in something so badly, it has no choice but to manifest. I talk a little bit about faith in there. one of the A's is ask for help, and that's what I did when I was younger and I was struggling. I asked because I knew I couldn't handle it myself. There is no shame in anyone asking for help. And in fact, what it really is a show of strength, not weakness. Yet somehow we've been duped into thinking, well, if I ask for something, then they're going to think I don't know what I'm doing or I can't handle it. And no, what you're actually saying is I want to do better, but this is what I need to do that.
So important. So important. Frank, do you have anything you'd like to say?
Yes. Karith, I've been encouraging Mike to speak on the topic of diversity because he's the most diverse person I know, all in one package, given all the things he's been through and lived with. And I was hoping maybe you had some advice for him on speaking on diversity.
Well, I think so much of it is about listening to other people and their experiences, which, as people who are in psychology and we understand the importance of that, because not everybody's coming from the same experience. And I think having the approach of understanding that and incorporating that into any conversation will make it a really powerful one. You're not, you cannot go in just trying to convince people to see it the way you do. That's never going to work. Or it may work like a fraction of the time. What you want to do is get people to think for themselves, but give them an opportunity to process something maybe in a different way, in a new light. And that's where I think using and utilizing the humor is really powerful. Because when you get people to laugh, it kind of neutralizes the space, especially when you're talking about something as difficult. And by difficult, I mean taboo and sensitive as diversity, especially right now. You're either going to have people come into the table on the offense or on the defense. And so to neutralize that space so that people can hear one another and feel heard, that's just critical. That's how you bring people together.
Yeah, I learned at a very young age that if I can make people laugh, they won't feel sorry for me. And they're grown up with a disability. And then as I got older, I learned because I'm a social worker, and when I sit down and talk with people about their problems, I have to keep my judgments at the door. Like, someone could say something I truly disagree with, and I'd be like, I have to come to the table with, okay, I could see how you think that way. How is it affecting you? And like swallow my judgment, put my judgment aside.
Actually, that's in the book. In one of the S's, I have a series of S's under stop it. And one of them is stop comparing yourself to other people. Stop, what was the other one I have? Stop judging. I learned doing stand-up. Do you remember Tim Davis from Stand Up New York, right? I used to take his class. I don't know if you ever took classes with him. He was more of a psychologist than he was like a comedy coach, but that was like his umbrella was comedy. And he taught me this really powerful lesson that basically when you have a judgment, what you're saying is everyone in the world should see that particular judgment or whatever you're holding in your mind as the truth. And you can't divert from it. There's no changing it. That's just what it is. And if they don't see it that way, then they are wrong. So he's like, that's a lot of rule books you're going to have to print out and deliver to everybody in the world, because there's at least, 1 billion people in China, now more. 1 billion people, that's a lot of copies, right? But he said, but having an opinion, everyone can have an opinion. Opinions are like belly buttons. He didn't say that, but we know what I'm saying. Everybody's got one, right? So an opinion means that, it's your opinion, and if nobody agrees with you, so what? That's no sweat off your back. But an opinion versus a judgment is such a more powerful thing, because especially when we're judging others, then we also have in the back of our head this fear or this idea of being judged ourselves. And that's a refrigerator on your back that you don't want, that you don't need.
I love that imagery, a refrigerator on your back. That's a lot to carry around. Thank you so much for coming on to the show and talking with us today. I would love to plug your book for you, so send me the link and we'll put it, when we advertise this episode, we'll put it in the link.
Absolutely.
And Karith, what's your next project? I mean, all of us have projects on hold because it would involve, live people in a room together. But what's next for you?
I actually am in Dallas doing some live stuff. If that we don't get shut down, I'm hosting the Young Americans for Liberty, their national conference. I'm doing a lot of virtual speaking, so I'm taking the programming that I do to corporations, to colleges. It's definitely not the same doing it virtually, but it's still a message that needs to get out. And right now, we need a lot of healing. We need a lot of moving forward because we're processing a lot right now. And so I'm just honored to be part of that process.
And the world is lucky to have you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah, and it's an uphill battle because I think there's one side of the political spectrum that the way to win elections is by dividing and pointing out differences and demonizing the other. And I think as long as it's possible to win elections that way, that will persist.
Mm-hmm.
Hopefully it will die of its own weight at some point, but I fear that, it's a very successful political strategy, so it will continue until it doesn't work anymore.
That's why we need to keep having these conversations, and you guys need to keep doing this, and we just need to keep getting the word out. Because I think more people have, and people know they have more in common than they don't. They just get caught up in the vitriol. They get caught up in the news cycles. We need to start having people just think for themselves and following the money and just be critical thinkers. Like, why am I being told this? Why is this being given airtime? Why is that not more part of the dialogue? We just need to get people to shut off the reality TV, shut off the news, talk to their neighbors, and put their own judgments aside for a little bit to hear what someone else has to say.
Right. Okay, so Frank, take it away. What do you got to say?
Well, I was going to say, how would someone, Karith, if they're watching this podcast, how would they get in touch with you?
Absolutely. Well, the good news is there are not too many people named Karith. And as far as I know, there's not another Karith Foster on the planet. So I can be found if you just even Google me, Google Karith. But my website is karith.com, Karith. My Twitter handle and my Instagram are at Karith Foster. And my Facebook is at Foster Karith because the other one's the personal page. So yeah, follow me, join me, be part of this process with me, and definitely get the book because it's, it's also funny. Like, I'm a comedian, so I'm going to have funny stuff in here. It's not just like this serious, but if I could just share again, the title is You Can Be Perfect, You Can Be Happy. Well, I hope everybody knows there's no such thing as perfect, but if not, I cover that in the book. But the idea is that while we're trying so hard sometimes, in our different areas of our life to reach perfection, something that's a golden carrot we'll never catch, what we can go for is happiness. And it's going to be as individual as we are, and the paths are going to be different, but it's possible. It's attainable.
I think the danger is letting the perfect be the enemy of the good or good enough.
Yeah.
Black and white thinking.
And Karith, from knowing you in stand-up, whenever I saw you, your persona, I thought, she's got it all together. That girl is perfect. And so it's awesome that you wrote this book to sort of dislodge that myth.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing. That's why I was so forthcoming about, my childhood experience, my life, and throughout the book, I talk about some pretty not perfect times. But they were lessons for me. They were growth periods. They were where the rubber hit the road in many instances. And and there are times it didn't always, and I screwed up, and, I don't call them mistakes because I got something out of it. I got a life lesson, You know, I could be in a totally different place with my career. There's one of the things in the chapter on say yes, like one of the S's. I had an opportunity to do something for Larry the Cable Guy in Comedy Central, and I turned it down.
Good girl.
Now he's actually a very dear friend of mine, and he's a lovely human being. And you know that's a character. It's a character. You know, Dan Whitney, the real guy, is just an angel,
Yeah.
amazing human being.
I had something similar where like Kirsten Ames from the HBO Comedy Festival really wanted me to go on to the HBO Comedy Festival, really wanted me to submit a tape, and I just blew it away because I didn't have the confidence.
That's exactly right. And that's, you know what I call that? I call that perfection paralysis. Because you think you have to be perfect to make it go. You have to, no, sometimes you just have to put it out there.
Right.
Because it's never going to be perfect. I mean, yeah, of course, you know, do the best you can and try to make it excellent. But if you're waiting for perfect, that ship is never going to come by.
Quick question, Karith. Is your book available on Audible?
It is not yet. That is in the process.
Good.
And it will be me who will be reading it, of course.
Had a girl.
So, but that's in the process. Trust me, it's in the process. It's COVID has thrown a lot of things off course.
All right, guys. Well, if you enjoyed the podcast, please rate, subscribe, review. It really does help. If you enjoyed the podcast, please tell your friends. If you didn't enjoy the podcast, we hope you have no friends. Mike?
Thank you all for coming. We'll see you next time. Thank you so much for being here, Karith.
Thank you.
Thanks, Karith.
It's been a treat.
Bye. So great to